very unnatural, artificial text. But still, this text is not like translationese is not a different language. The text which is translated, as awkward as the translation may be, is still in another language afterwards.
Excuse me, Kundoku is the text itself or the system of
the
dots?
technique of translation, which can look like the one with the red dots we've seen, or the one with the inversion mark, something like that, for the example from the monitor. So this is a translation technique usually called connectless. So from Chinese, when we get into the syntax, just a simple dependency tree. We can compare those two texts that got produced. The first one, Chinese, if we just go to the top linear reading and read it's Chinese to the bottom, we have the first. And if we use all those little marks, all those phonograms, we get a parallel text, which of course occupies the same logograms, but also the phonograms, and gives us a completely different syntax. So two parallel linguistic texts got produced in two distinct languages, of course. And the important thing is the peculiarity of that translation is that they share the same logographic elements in writing, because why bother writing the kanji once again all the time when in Japanese you use the same script anyway? And this is probably, so I think the problem that Levy 2011 has here is the double meaning of the word text. When I look up text in a dictionary, I get at least two meanings. The first one is like a written text as such, and the second is like the linguistic sense of text, which can basically mean any utterance. So two utterances, two linguistic texts get produced, but they share the same elements, partially they share the same elements in writing. The second one is that literary Chinese is not a foreign language, which is quite startling, but yes, people write it. Also, most Japanese practitioners of Kundoku were monolingual and did not conceive of Chinese text as text in a foreign language. An educated Japanese, for example, could read a Chinese text by pronouncing it in Japanese without any knowledge of Chinese or any need for translation. Although by convention we speak of classical Chinese, in fact, this language is as much Vietnamese, Japanese, or Korean as it is Chinese, which would be quite lovely, because then you would have only learned to speak like Japanese and you could speak automatically all the other languages, or at least read them, but this is just not the case. Vietnamese represents a living language, unlike classical Chinese, which represents a high register written voice that can be recited but is not an everyday spoken language. True, literary Chinese was probably not used as a spoken language, but only because it was a written language, or maybe exclusively a written language, doesn't make it less a foreign language. It's still a different language, but for a certain purpose. So we have a division of labor here, which in linguistics we call the phenomenon of diglossia, when we have like one spoken variety of a language and another variety of the written one, and sometimes we can't speak of different varieties of one language, sometimes we have two distinct languages. Like for example in Japan, they were writing Chinese, but they were speaking Japanese, and here in Russia, of course, you're familiar with like the Church Slavonic, which was distinct to the spoken language at that time, and the same in Europe with like Latin, which was well, it was spoken, but it was more a written language, and the people were speaking other languages depending on which country you were in. And Kundoku could only be used for literary Chinese texts. For example, Kosukegawa 2014 writes that the source text of Gunteng glossing has always been classical Chinese text, specifically Chinese Buddhist texts or secular Chinese text, which is not quite true, because if we look at examples like translation from the Lido Yeni, we see here a text which is written in early Mandarin, early modern Chinese, and of course shows thus features which are not present in literary Chinese. So we have this, which is usually not found in classical Japanese at that frequency, read as not so attributive or genitive, or however you want to call it. And this one as a negation for the existential verb to have or to be, translates into Japanese as aru kotonashi. This one usually in classical Chinese is something different, like a copular verb. In early modern Chinese, and still in modern Chinese, it's more like the Japanese equivalent of mata or mo, so inclusive also. And this is another difference in this one. So we see it has various features which are not there in classical language, but still we can use the same translation technique called kundoku for other varieties of the language, and it doesn't stop here. We only don't have like other varieties, other historical stages of the Chinese language that were translated by this system. We also have in the 19th century, when Japanese people came to learn English, they were using exactly the same technique. So we can see here numbers. In those circles we can see the numbers when you read which word. On top we have, with phonograms, with katakana, again the reading, the pronunciation, and we have the translation underneath, the Japanese translation. So you have to follow the numbers here again. It just works the same as it did with Chinese we've seen before. And the next language you know better than me, it works the same as Russian as well. So we have an example here of the first Russian grammar that was published in Japan, only with reading on top here, no numbers. But for the next example, and still from the 19th century, we also have numbers when to read which word. So it works for all languages. And the main point is here that whenever the need arose to translate different languages, then this technique could also be used for different languages. But the thing is that they mostly were dealing with Chinese texts in Japan, so they were mostly using it only for Chinese texts. But whenever they had to translate another language, another historical stage of the Chinese language, or completely different languages, it was no problem to adapt the kundoku system to translate other languages as well. So writing own text, this is something which is quite a bit more difficult than just reading other texts. So you can't learn this, you have to invent how to write your own language with Chinese characters. How does this work? So some preliminaries. First, early written sources in Japanese appear especially with the boom of written text from the 7th century onwards. We have quite a lot of sources there. It doesn't look so good before the 7th century, but from there on we have a lot of sources. The first artifacts appear as in form of small wooden tablets called mokkan in Japanese, or epigraphic inscriptions on stone and metal. And the first bigger works, so not short inscriptions, appear in form of histories and poetic anthologies. And those exist in Chinese and in Japanese. In Chinese, we have the Nihon Shoki in 720 and the Kaikuso as a poetic anthology in 751. And in Japanese, we have the Kojiki in 712 and the Mayoshu in 759, circa around 759. So we see that around the same time, people were writing Chinese texts and Japanese texts. When it comes to writing Chinese texts, for example, we have the Hokkaigisho in 615, and it's an annotated commentary on the Lotus Sutta. And it's usually considered as the oldest surviving manuscript written in Japan. And it's traditionally attributed to the famous Prince Shirotoko, and it's written in Chinese. So what Prince Shirotoko, if he was the author, had to do here was only learn the Chinese language. This one's statue held in the Golden Hall of the Horyuji in modern Nara Prefecture. It was casted in 607, and this is why it's important for this. It bears a Japanese inscription on the back of its halo. This inscription has 90 characters in 5 lines, and it's sometimes said that a Korean scribe has written it, or maybe helped them to write it, because at this point, at the beginning of the 7th century, writing Japanese with Chinese character was still considered to be quite a difficult task, and we see it just here. The inscription looks as follows, so it's on the back. And the translation, which I'm not going too much in depth, you have it on your handout, so you can check it later. You have the original and the translation, so let's just jump straight into the question if this text is Chinese or Japanese, and how can we say if this text is Chinese or Japanese. Does it give us any hints, or how can we say that it is Japanese? Because it is Japanese, it is not Chinese. First of all, we have honorifics, and then we have syntax. For the honorifics, we have something like opomi, which is an honorific prefix, which is not used in Chinese at all. So a Chinese person would just not understand what these two characters would mean when it would be in front of a noun, for example. And again, we have other honorific verbs, respectful language, tsukabimatsu. All these are not found in the Chinese language, but only in the Japanese language. So although they were written, of course, with Chinese characters, because they only had Chinese characters to write their own text, we can see from the honorific system, which was not present in Chinese, that this text has to be a Japanese one. And we also have, besides the Chinese word order, which is also present in this text, we also have another kind of word order which resembles the Japanese one, so have the object before the predicate and not the other way around. And we have converbs that actually follow and not precede the verb as we would expect from Chinese. So for example, we have this small bit, and to the right we would probably expect something like that in the Chinese language. If we want to translate it to Chinese, it still sounds kind of artificial, but this would be more or less like the Chinese rendition of what the Japanese text on the left says. So these two characters for the honorific we wouldn't find at all, and these three first characters are the object to this verb, so this has the Japanese word order, and we have to switch it around to make it Chinese. And at the very end, again, we have a word of saying, so he said, that is this one, the saying. It's at the very end, and from the Chinese viewpoint, of course, we would expect it then to be at the very beginning of the sentence. Same for this. This is the accusative object to this verb, so it should be the other way around, like we see on the right here again, which would probably be the Chinese text then, and the honorific, which would not appear at all there. And of course, the last character is optional for Chinese. And this one would be swapped around again. So from all these points, we can see that the text was actually never supposed to be Chinese, but always supposed to be read as Japanese, and was written in Japanese. But the problem was just that they only had Chinese characters, so from today's standpoint, it's rather difficult, if we only see Chinese characters, to say that it has to be a Chinese text, which is obviously not the case in this one, and not the case in, the translation, sorry. And obviously not the case for the following examples.
But there is a Chinese word order in the handout.
Yes, it is Chinese and Japanese. Sometimes
both.
it's Chinese, sometimes it's Japanese.
Mix. So there are Japanese honorific and Chinese syntax word order, right?
Yes.
Combined in one sentence.
Yes.
Right, get it.
It's a mess. I probably have to. I'm sorry, just. I'm sorry. Oh. Alright, here we go. So here's a picture of an archaeological excavation site, and we come to Mokkan now, because those Mokkan were found exactly at sites like this. the following mock was found in 2008, I think, and it's clearly Japanese, and mid 2008. It's very easy to say that this is Japanese, much more easier than the one before, because this one uses only phonograms, no logograms at all. If we use only phonograms, we can say, okay, this is just a phonographic rendition of the Japanese language using the sound values only for these Chinese characters. So if one tries to read it as Chinese, it makes absolutely no sense at all. So those characters were used for their phonetic value, which they had in Chinese, to represent the sounds in Japanese. And we can date them quite exactly because they were found, like with other archaeological findings, and where they were found give us quite a good hint when these mock-kan were written. So this is quite fortunate. And these two lines resemble a poem from the Mayoshu, so we have a connection between transmitted poetic anthology and an archaeological finding, which is quite interesting to have. And the Manyoshu version goes just the same, so the translation we have here also accounts for the text we have on the mock-kan. So this is clearly Japanese, no doubt about it. So we have two basic principles of writing. We first have the logographic writing, so that a character is used to write the same or similar word as the character does in Chinese. So logographic writing, especially in the context of the Japanese writing at the first stage. And we have the phonographic writing, where the character is used to represent a similar sound as the character does in Chinese, as I just told. So on the left side, we have a phonographic text, a logographic text, sorry. There were no phonograms in it, so it's a logographic rendition, and this one was a phonographic one. But still, both texts are Japanese. If we have this character, for example, in Chinese, in Middle Chinese, early Middle Chinese, this was something read as het, meaning 8. And it was used in the Japanese language, to write the Japanese language, sometimes to use in use for the same word. So the same meaning, the word 8 means in Old Japanese ya, so it was used as that. But it was also used for the sound value alone. And this, like for example how we have seen on the mock-kan, so it was only used with a similar sound value pa, so not quite ya, but pa. And this, to the left, the logographic reading of ya was also used then again as a phonogram without the meaning of 8 in other contexts. So from one character we have like a direct translation and writing the same word then, and we have different phonetic values on the right. So this makes the old Japanese writing system rather complex, because in one text we can expect all these possibilities. And indeed we can go for both at the same time, so those of you who have read the Mayoshu are familiar with this. It's a collection of well over 4,000 poems, and most of them are actually written in a phonographic, logographic mixed script. And the ones written in the phonographic script are the most valuable source for Old Japanese, because when a linguist reads the Mayoshu, he's of course not interested in the logographic poems, because they don't give us any hint how the language sounded. They're interesting to look into for the history of writing, but we don't get any information on the sound values of that language. So especially book 14 and 20 are very important for reconstructing the Japanese dialects. But this just as a side note, we want to look into the mixed script, which looks like this. So sticking to the colors, the red marked characters are meant to be logograms and the blue ones are phonograms. So we get the following reading in the transcription. We can mark the logographic characters by capitals, and in small script write the phonograms. And again, you have this example on your handout, so I will not stay here for too long. The translation, even if I were to be in the land of Ise, what would I do there? Since my Lord is not there anymore too. So the last part is just the last line. And as we see, just looking ignoring maybe the translation or the further analysis. Just looking at the script, we see that we have a mix of red and blue, so logographic, phonographic, all in one script. And this is important because it will come back to us in the following example. So this is basically how most of the Mayoshi looks like. So we have logographic writing. The last is a problem, because when we have these two characters, we don't know just how to read it. We know, well, it has to be some kind of form from Adu, right? But we don't know which one. So if this comes before a noun, we have to use the adnominal negation. If we have it at the sentence end, we have to use the sentence final negation or something else. So this can be read variously in isolation, and only the context tells us that in this context we've just seen that it's read to be aranaku. So there are probably at least 5 to 6 different possibilities how to read this, and this is the problem of the logographic script. And for phonograms this is easy because we can just know this character is always being read as no, so we read no, and the second one always read E, always read E. So the context doesn't matter at all, even if we have it in isolation. If we have only one character, we know clearly how to read it, if we know that it is a phonogram. And the same for all the other phonograms. Oh yes, in parentheses I gave the Middle Chinese reconstruction of Baxter Sagar's system, if you're interested in that. And the last character is a bit different because this is not the Chinese pronunciation it was used for, but the Japanese. So this was not read anything like the Middle Chinese sound value, but it was read as mashi, so as a Japanese translation and then used as a phonogram only, and here for 2 syllables and not 1 syllable. So this is different to all the others. So why all these are called Mayogana, the last one would be called traditionally in Japanese research, the Kungana, and all the others would be Ongana. So we have an Old Japanese verb meaning must, and it's written with this character, and therefore this character could also be read as a phonogram in other contexts as mashi. And the translation, the meaning of increase, doesn't matter at all when it's used only as a phonogram, as in the poem and the preceding poem. So how did the situation change, or maybe not changed, after the 8th century? So we remember that we were like in the 8th century or before, Mayoshi was in the middle of the 8th century. We have a rise of primarily phonographic writing, because kana evolved, as I just said, like in the 9th century, beginning of 9th century, and the forerunners of the katakana and hiragana both developed. So the Mayogana we've just seen were the source for the modern hiragana, and it looked like this. It was a cursivization progress. So for example, if we have these base characters for I, na, and wa, we have a second stage of cursivization, and then we have the modern forms as we find today in modern Japanese on the very right. But the logographic writing of Japanese did not stop with the emergence of kana, and was very popular among the following type of text. So they were able to write Japanese clearly in phonographic script using only kana, but they were not doing it all the time, at least. We have war tales, for example, like the Show Monkey or the Oto Monogatari, which are exclusively written in kanji, so Chinese characters. We have folk tales like the Samboe Kotoba and the Shintoshu. The first one, there's a version of it written in kana and Chinese characters, but there's also a version written exclusively in a logographic script. So of one text we have different versions sometimes. One version being more logographic, one more phonographic, one a mix in between. Court diaries, which are usually only in like, or at least 99% written in logographic writing, like Mido, Kampaki, Gonki, and Shiroyuki. We have historical chronicles like the Azuma Kagami, and these are all Japanese texts, but well, in the logographic script, so we have to keep that in mind. And for letters, the situation was something special because, well, up to the 19th century, Japanese letters were written sometimes exclusively with Chinese characters, and even with Chinese word order sometimes, so in a non-linear fashion. So they were rather difficult to read. We have so-called mana bon, like the Heike Monogatari, Soga Monogatari, Kokini Wakashu, Issei Monogatari, especially the last two, are famous for being written like exclusively in kanji or almost exclusively in Chinese characters. But what does Manabon mean? So let's take a quick look at the Issei Monogatari, which looks like this, for example. Or it can also look like this. This is probably what you would usually expect from like Heian Japanese texts, like with a cursive script. But then you also have the Manabon, which look like this, only kanji. And this one is also the Issei Monogatari. So if we look at modern editions of classic Japanese texts, we sometimes get an artificial picture because, for example, when we have the Issei Monogatari and we look it up in Nihonko Tenbugak Taikei series, for example, we see a very artificial picture because there's not the Issei Monogatari as such. There are various editions of it, and this is just one edition as the others are. So we have to keep that in mind when dealing with those texts, that they will not like having one form and being always in that form, but can change quite a lot. So if we compare, for example, this and the translation goes here to the version we have in the Manabon. So here again, blue stands for the phonograms and the red for the logograms. So even in this kana version, we have some logograms in between. There's probably no bigger text that was exclusively written in kana. There were always some kanji in between, some logograms in between. But for this one, it looks like we have some more logograms here. And indeed, of course, we have some more logograms in the Manabon. But still, there are quite a lot of phonograms. So this looks rather like the Manyoshu did before. So this style was still done after the 8th century as well. And if we look at this one, it looks similar. So we have a mixed script as well, very similar to the Manyoshu. And that's the morphological analysis. And again, here we see at the very, at the third example, we see this, like, you can see this one here, like the swapping around mark from the Chinese texts. It's still found in some, here, it's still found in Japanese texts to do the same. But why are they doing this? I mean, why not write this character and then this is clearly supposed to be Japanese? Why go for this? Yes, this is from a collection of letters from the 12th century. So a textbook on letter writing, how do you write letters? It's not that easy. Again, here we have a logographic, phonographic mix. In this sentence, only logograms can be found. We have, on the one hand, a Japanese word order we wouldn't expect in Chinese. On the other hand, we also have a Japanese word order sometimes. So again, we have a mix of word orders just from the writing, because the outcome, the linguistic outcome, the text itself, the utterance, is of course clearly Japanese. There's no switching around on that level. And so it's only on the writing level. And for the honorifics, we have some honorifics we would not expect from Chinese people. So it goes on with court diaries, which, sorry, this is like, just, you can probably skip that. Yeah, we can. This is from a court diary, and again, here we have only logograms, and we have a mix right next to each other, which is quite startling. The same verb in the first, so here we have the object preceding it, and here it comes again, and the object comes afterwards. So the same verb with a different verb right next to each other. Only on the writing level, of course. When you read the text, it's clearly Japanese all the time. And this is from the Heike. You have all these examples, by the way, on your handout, so don't worry. They were even using the system, the Okoto-ten system, with the red dots for Japanese text as well. So we have the Heike Monogatari, which some of you may know as a mix of like kana and Chinese characters, but it could also be written with kanji exclusively. And it mainly follows the Chinese word, but sometimes it also have, like at least visually, a Japanese word order, a Chinese word order. It has some inversion marks again, so we have like this one is the 2 we know, the 1 here, the 2, yeah, the 1 above. So this is not like written linearly. And this is from another Manabon. this one without any okototen. This one follows mainly Japanese word order and writing, and it has more phonograms. So this is the same sentence, written differently, a bit at least. So this is from the left example, and this is from the right example. Again, the red characters marked are logograms, and the blue one, only one each, but the same in both cases, a phonogram. So this is the or more exactly the at that time probably pronounced. So we have a production of two different texts, at least a little bit different here and there. The meaning is roughly the same, so we can go for one translation of both sentences, because they differ only in very small parts. They mainly mean the same, but still you can find differences in the linguistic utterance that gets produced. Not only by the logograms and phonograms, but also, of course, by the red dots for the first example, of course, which are not implied here. But why go for such non-linear logographic writing? Well, when writing Chinese loanwords, it's simply easier to read them in the same orthography. So when we have, for example, in modern Japanese Doksha, we still have like the order of first the doku, so the verb, and then the sho, so the object. But today, of course, it's one noun, and you can't just analyze it as something not linearly written, but it just shows that you can just write the Chinese loanword, even the phrase, the Chinese phrase, as one word, because it's simply easier. You don't have to invent anything, you just have to copy. It's easy. And it's used to imitate Chinese text from its looks. So non-linear writing, okototen, which was typical like for Chinese text, using no phonograms. And the Japanese text is then, at least visually, on par with the highly prestigious canon of Chinese classics. And this was probably the main reason why these texts were written that cumbersome. The orality in general is an often negligible feature of logographic writing, because who cares how the text sounds like if everyone gets the meaning anyway? So why go for phonograms if the text is much longer than you could just use logograms? Everybody understands the text, and why care for the reading? Of course, the reading was important if you go for poetry, where the reciting of the poem was like the orality was the main feature. The writing proper names was especially important. And you would only go, of course, for phonograms there because you want to make clear just how the name sounds. But if you go for example, a diary or short notes or stuff like that, you don't really need to have an exact pronunciation. As long as the meaning is clear, you don't need the pronunciation at all. And of course, logographic writing takes fewer characters to write and thus less time. This is explicitly stated in the Kojiki, in the foreword of the Kojiki, and the author says that he's using the logographic script because it's shorter. So let's take a look into the Korean situation. So it's quite difficult, even more difficult to determine when the Korean people have started writing, have started reading. The Chinese language, at least officially, became institutionalized during the Han Dynasty. And Chinese writing first appeared in Goryeo around the 4th century, in Paekchon around the 4th century probably, and lastly in Shilla. So we know the order, how writing goes down the peninsula, but exactly when we can't know for sure. And similar to Japanese, we find the first epigraphic inscriptions in Chinese, again around the 5th century. So this is usually considered to be one of the most famous first examples of Korean